Welcome to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Chris Sutcliffe. This week, as part of our ongoing mission to spotlight the people and products powering publishing, first time, we're hearing from the Baltimore Banner's Vice President of Product, Eric Ulken. First though, we'd like to thank BlueConic, who have kindly come on board as sponsors of this season of the Publisher Podcast and newsletter. BlueConic is the customer data operating system that makes your data work harder so you don't have to. Whether it's capturing valuable audience insights or activating them with precision, the possibilities are endless with BlueConic's all-in-one platform. Learn more at blueconic.com, where data is for doing. Well, at Media Voices, we love nothing more than hearing from people who are bucking established trends and fighting back against the inertia of received wisdom. At the Baltimore Banner, which is a relatively new, non-profit news outlet serving the Maryland area, launched in 2022, this experimentation is taking place around its app. For one thing, it has one. For new local news outlets, the path of least resistance is to launch a site, a newsletter, and then maybe bang out the odd print product. But the Banner had an app very early into its life cycle, going off that beaten path. In fact, Ulken tells me that when he joined, one of his first questions was, why launch an app and why so soon? But as you'll hear from our discussion, it is delivering for a significant proportion of that audience, and is allowing the Banner's team to create new points of engagement. But what I found especially interesting is what having an app signifies for audiences who may be just on the verge of subscribing. Eric says it far better than I can, but he speaks about it as a flag planted in the ground, a declaration of the Banner's intent to be around for a very long time indeed. To begin with though, I asked Eric to take us through the story of the Banner from 2022 through to today.
Well, first, let me talk about the Banner. It is a pretty unique startup, nonprofit news organization that exists to serve the Baltimore region, but also the state of Maryland at large. And it is, I think what's especially unique about it is that the business model is attempting to sort of pull all of the threads of revenue and really sort of build a digital business that is entirely sort of self-sustaining. We have a generous runway from a local philanthropist who has basically bootstrapped us for a period of time, but then we're going to need to stand on our own. And so, without a print product or without any kind of sort of other thing to support us. And so we've built a revenue strategy around digital subscriptions, advertising, philanthropy, events, and all of those things together we expect are going to support a newsroom of 85 plus people. And we're really excited about where we are on that journey. So about 50,000 subscribers at this point, and growing.
That's fantastic.
You asked about me too. I'll just quickly. I work in the product organization at the Banner, which is a small team. We have about 3 product managers, designer, and about 5 engineers building the digital products that sort of underlie the business, the journalism. And I come from an editorial background, but I've spent a large part of my career now in product, previously at Gannett, the USA Today network, and at other local newspapers around the country.
Nice, fantastic. I mean, it's such a. I wrote a piece not too long ago about philanthropy and sort of those kind of not-for-profit organizations, news organizations in and around the US, and there's a lot of experimentation going on. When it launched, because it only launched 2 years ago, probably
a little over 2 years ago now.
So, to what extent was the plan for monetization and revenue sort of set already when you launched then?
So I'll just note, I joined after launch, so
Yeah.
I have what I'm going to tell you is somewhat hearsay, but I have a good lead on sort of the origin story of the Banner, and I think the business model was sort of well figured out very early on, and I think what was smart about it is that it was not an effort to sort of build a business on any single revenue stream, but the assumption, and I think it's proving out, is that the most important single revenue stream is likely to be customers of our journalism. And so we needed to get that part right But that alone was not enough, right? We would also need philanthropic money. We would need to build an advertising business, et cetera. And so we've been doing all those things.
And so it's a very unique proposition for us in the UK, because when we have, launches of local news, obviously the scale of local and regional is very different, but they typically just go with the website alone. But the Banner has had an app basically since the beginning. Am I right?
Just about, yeah.
And so why was that so important, do you feel like, to the proposition?
Well, I had the same question when I joined. And actually, as I was talking to folks as they were sort of starting up the Banner, my first question was, why an app? Why so soon? Why not get the web right first? But I think the app play turned out to be really smart, because apps have become sort of table stakes for news organizations, especially subscription driven news organizations today. I think there's an expectation among some users that we deliver sort of a very smooth, streamlined reading experience on a mobile device that really sort of elevates the journalism, puts the user experience front and center, and gets some of that other stuff out of the way. And the app does that beautifully in a way that mobile web just doesn't. It's not for everybody, and I think that's one of the things that we've learned over time, is that not all of our users are going to be app users, but for those who want it, it's a really powerful tool.
And I wondered, where do you think that perception that it is table stakes has come from? Has it been from the success of the nationals and the kind of international titles, which have those very prominent apps?
Yeah, I suspect so. I think one of the things that we've heard is, well, I subscribe to the New York Times, or I subscribe to the Journal. They invest in their apps. If I'm going to spend a similar sum of money to subscribe to a local news organization, I expect a similar experience. Again, not everybody's telling us that, but some people, I think, are, both through their words and their actions. The app is very sticky. It has a lot sort of deeper usage than the web on a sort of a per user basis. And so we feel like the app sort of serves those people really, really well, and it gives them an opportunity to sort of stay connected to us and go deep when they want.
Nice, fantastic. So one of the things that struck me when I was sort of reading around was this idea that I've been writing about app strategy for newspapers for a decade plus at this point. So I just wondered, how would you, and the attitude to them has been all over the place in that time. Once upon a time they were, the great hope, then they were sort of on the back burner a little bit. How do you characterize the conversation around news apps now?
Yeah, I've been on the I've been in the app world a bit, and I do remember when we first started talking about mobile apps. I think we all sort of naively assumed that this is the content consumption was just going to shift to the app, and that we would all need to like seriously invest in apps or just get left behind, and that customers would want a walled garden, which I think was also like a kind of a crazy assumption. The beauty of the web is that you can use a lot of different news sources, and some customers do apparently want a walled garden, but not everybody. And so that's why I think when we started, we had this sort of this assumption that the app was going to be the thing, and over time, I think it's become a little bit more of an understanding that the app is the thing for some people, and it may be that in fact, we know that a number of our users use both the app and the web, and seem to do that very well. Go back and forth.
That's such a fascinating conversation, because that presumably goes back to what news people have always known, which is it's about super serving your audience where they want to be. I just wonder then, how do you manage that interplay between people who choose to exist, consume on both, and how much did you have to invest in making sure that they weren't getting, I suppose, served the same content, or that there's parity of experience between the two? How do you have to go around sort of like managing that relationship?
Yeah, that has been a really difficult thing to navigate, in part because you can spend a lot of money building a platform,
Yeah.
and to do to do justice to the app in the same way that we do the web is not a trivial investment. That said, I think we started with the assumption that the app should not be a second class citizen. A lot of news organizations, I think, over time have said, well, yeah, the app is table stakes, so we're going to do the sort of the minimum kind of investment in the app, and we're going to put up an app for those who want it, and maybe it's going to be a digital replica, or maybe it's going to be something that that just gives those people who want to read the newspaper on their mobile device, something. Well, we don't have a newspaper for one thing, so when we started talking about, I think, an app, the assumption was that it would be a very sort of digital native experience, and we've made a few decisions, I think, that where we've had the option to sort of not sort of invest in aspects of the app. And I think we have always sort of prioritized getting a really good experience on the app, so that people don't look at the app and say, well, actually, I need to go to the web to see the full thing. Is it a perfect one-for-one experience? No. We're working in that direction. I think we've got a number of sort of things in the works where we are actually planning to deploy on web and app at the same time, because we want to make sure that we don't leave the app behind. But it is, it's investing in another platform, which is not a small expense.
Oh, and it's so impressive that you're already sort of grappling with that, where I know there's a lot of nationals in the UK which still have not solved that problem, and they've been grappling with it for years and years and years at this point. You mentioned kind of the breadth and variety of your audience, serving Maryland kind of much more generally. What do you feel it is about kind of your in totality, your consumers or your audience's consumption habits that means that the app really works well for them? What are they sort of getting out of it on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one thing I think they're getting is sort of the accessibility and the convenience of being able to go to it anytime, for any length of time. And we have just released some functionality in the app that enables users to sort of customize their push notifications so that they're not being bombarded with everything that we publish, but rather have the ability to say, I'm interested in these geographies or in these topics. Let me sort of quiet the noise a little bit and just focus on the things that I'm interested in. And so I think we're really interested in how that performs. It's early days, but so far it's promising as a way to sort of build that relevance and habit that we really want to see out of the app. I don't really, frankly, care how long people spend in the app, as long as they are regularly using it. That is a metric, I think, that is actually more important than time spent, because it suggests sort of a top of mind presence.
Nice. I mean, we can definitely get onto some of those metrics in a bit, because I find that completely fascinating. One of the things I will say about push notifications is I don't think anybody's quite solved the frequency issue there. I remember, this is a long time ago now, I think 2015, I got woken up at like 4:00 in the morning by a push notification from the BBC to tell me that Beyonce Knowles was not pregnant, which is a ridiculous thing to push anyway. And I wouldn't mind, but it turned out a couple of days later she was. So it was the most pointless push notification of all time. I wondered then.
Well, I think the platform to some extent have solved this problem for us by allowing users to be a little bit more judicious about what kinds of push notifications they receive and when. And so, like in many cases, I think where publishers have misbehaved, platforms have come in and said, "Hey, wait a second."
Yeah, that's totally fair. I wondered then. Obviously, you've got the app is a big part of it. You said it's not for everybody, provided you're serving the audiences who want it that way. That's your goal. How does it factor into that initial outreach, and I suppose the monetization strategy as well? To what extent is the app a selling point when you go out to audiences and say, would you like to support us?
Well, we have some anecdotal evidence that shows that about a quarter of our subscribers actually downloaded the app before they subscribed.
Nice.
So there's good evidence that the app is part of the value proposition ahead of subscription. But what we know for sure is that once people subscribe and download the app, and of course the app is a big part of our onboarding flow, Not everybody does it, but those subscribers who do download the app and sort of sign in and start using it are among our most engaged subscribers. They are coming back far more frequently than subscribers on the web, for example.
Well, that neatly tees up my next question, because for years and years and years, we've been hearing from previous guests who've been talking about apps, how difficult it can be to actually get people to build the app into their habits. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was some research that said, if you're not in the top 5 most used apps on somebody's phone, then you're basically not seeing them, even once a fortnight. I assume that has changed now, thinking about my own app usage habits since then. But to what extent, how have you managed to convince people to get across that, quote unquote, hassle gap when it comes to getting people to download that app? You've obviously got people who download it before they even sign up, but then to come back to the app as well.
Yeah, I think that's where push notifications really become important. And despite our best efforts, I think only about half of our app users are opted in for push notifications. So
Yeah.
that is that's an area where we think we still have some opportunity. But for those who are, we are able to bring them back through sort of relevant push notifications very frequently. We also have, like, we've seen data on people. We looked at one user who is opted out of push notifications, but religiously opens the app every day. And so, like, there's different people do different things, and I think that's one of the things that product folks have to keep in mind, is that our users are not a monolith. They have different priorities, different habits, different levels of technical sophistication. We have a lot of subscribers who are maybe older and are not interested in the app, but are religious readers through email. In fact, some people don't even go to the website; they're just reading our emails. And so we want to give all of those people a good experience, and that means that we really do have to sort of think smartly about sort of how we prioritize our work, and that we don't sort of over optimize for an assumption about how most people use our stuff.
Sorry, pardon me 1 second. I've just got a cough. That was perfect, by the way. So one of the things that we know a lot of other news outlets are doing is they're using products like, crosswords, cooking, to create that stickiness, to get people coming back outside of the news content itself. So The Guardian does that really effectively in the UK. A couple of the other local and regional papers do it as well. To what extent is that something that you are experimenting with? And, is that almost a, for the subset of audiences that like that kind of stuff, is that an opportunity for you?
Perhaps. I think one of the questions is what can we do that people aren't already getting through, the New York Times, games and puzzles app, or other similar experiences that are frankly, better funded and are able to sort of build things that we're not. If there are experiences and sort of habit forming games or puzzles or things that we think that we sort of have a right to win at, I think we're very interested in doing something. We do have, for example, a news quiz that goes to subscribers that they can find both on the web and on the app. And the news quiz is something that not a huge number of people use, but those who use it regularly. So I think that's an example of something that's local, that's sort of bespoke to us, that feels like the Banner in a way that crosswords might not. Not saying we wouldn't do it. In fact, we did launch with a games, sort of a web-based games vertical that I don't think actually performed all that well, and so that's one of the reasons why we don't have it anymore.
I mean, it's still so young. I mean, that experimentation seems like it will be part of the roadmap for, forever, I imagine. One of the things that one of my my hometown, it's the Warrington Guardian, our local app. One of the things that it does really, really well is it provides it hyperfixates on the local stuff. Obviously, again, very different scale, but it's always giving updates, and it's very modular in terms of how it can display, local football team matches that are ongoing, and it can provide that information at the top. How flexible is your app in terms of what you can do with it? I know you do work with PugPig, am I right? In terms
We
of
do, yes. I think there's a fair amount of flexibility, but I also think because there's a white label product, it is built to serve the most common use cases. Fortunately, our use cases are largely fit into that mold. But I think there are things that we might at some point want to do that sort of stretch the boundaries of what what a white label app can do. And in those cases, I think we've had a pretty good working relationship with the PugPig team, and they've asked us to challenge them, and so we're looking forward to doing that. We have some things on the roadmap that I think are pretty challenging, but I feel like the use cases that many publishers have are not actually that complicated, and are usually pretty well served by some of these white label products, in a sense that it is still much more cost effective to rent the technology than to buy it or build it yourself, right? In the sense that it would take several full-time staffers to build the kind of functionality that we get with PugPig, or with other similar tools like that, and we just wouldn't be able to afford that at this point in our evolution.
See, you preempted my next question again, which is obviously you are relatively small as an outlet. But how many staff did you say full time?
We have a little over 100 full-time staff, of which I think about 85 are journalists.
85 journalists. All right. So I'm wondering then, you don't have a print product, so it's web. And it's web and app, right? So how does that impact how you report on, I suppose, internal success, and how do you go about feeding back to what the app is doing really well, and then disseminating that through the wider organization, letting people know how changes to the app are going to impact, how their work is presented, how audiences are going to consume it?
I'm not sure we've got that quite cracked, to be honest. We do have, of course, the dashboards that go out to the full organization on a regular basis, and we're pretty transparent about numbers. As a nonprofit, we don't have to worry about tipping off competitors and things like that. But I think where we struggle, I think, with the app is there's not a clean sort of North Star metric on the app. It's not total downloads or total users or even active users, although active users is an important number. It's really like, how do we sort of capture which users are sort of satisfied with the app experience, in whatever way that might be. Some people might come multiple times a day, and that's a satisfactory experience for them. Some people might come once a week, and that's a satisfactory experience for them. And so I don't know that we have a metric that really sort of captures satisfaction. And we have been doing some qualitative research where we've talked to subscribers in particular about their experience with the banner. And I think we've gotten some good insight there on sort of what constitutes satisfaction, but that's hard to read from the tea leaves of site analytics and app analytics, to be honest. So still working on that one, but we do certainly have some kind of regular metrics like active users that we share widely.
Nice. It's so interesting you were talking there about kind of that qualitative side of it. I was talking with a couple of people from, again, a local title in the UK, and they were saying that they have found, I'm sure this isn't the case for everybody, but they have found that qualitative stuff is almost more valuable to them than those kind of the proxies of engagement that you can occasionally get through.
Yeah, it gives us the why. We don't know the why when we're looking at web analytics and app analytics, and that can be incredibly frustrating because we see certain trends, but we don't understand what is causing people to do those things.
Well, I think it's fascinating as well, particularly because of how young the organization is presumably those answers will change as you sort of grow, as you find new ways to serve your audience. The app might then change its role within the organization. So how set up are you for that change, I suppose, is the question. How ready are you to is the team to kind of pivot and go, well, actually, this side of the app isn't working quite so well, as you mentioned with the kind of the games on the website. Let's just kill that and move on to something that our audience finds more valuable.
Yeah, well, this is another reason why I think having a partner, a vendor partner that sort of owns the tech is helpful, because when we do want to pivot, and we have done some sort of tweaks in strategy, we are working on some things now in terms of improving the way sort of the home screen operates and stuff like that. We are not alone in that, and we can benefit from their experience and best practice that they've developed across a number of years with many publishers, and we can not have to sort of build all the things that we want to test. So that I think has been good. Largely, though, the focus of the app has not shifted a great deal over the course of, at least the course of my time at the Banner. And the one thing I'd say we are focusing more on right now is push notifications, just because we know anecdotally from qualitative research that some people feel like we send too many. We hear the same thing about email. And so we're investing right now in trying to build a more customizable approach to both email and push notifications. So people who do feel like they're getting too much, they're hearing from us too often, can sort of tune down the volume, if you will.
Yeah, that must have been such a hard thing to realize. The temptation when you're so early is to be, present constantly and think that you need to be reminding people. But obviously, going back to that anecdotal side, it sounds like people know who you are and they know what they get out of that relationship. So you don't. It just must be a really hard thing to kind of step back and say, actually, maybe we should be doing less rather than more in terms of kind of those notifications.
Yeah, that is that's a muscle that's not easily flexed, especially for an organization, for any newsroom who's used to telling people about all the great things that they're doing, all the great journalism that they're publishing. The reflex to actually not send a notification or alert for this is just a muscle that we haven't built.
It's obviously the Banner's still relatively young, and I suppose that a big part of the journey is still about education, letting people know who you are, what you're up to, what your pitch is. To what extent do you feel like the app is almost an antenna that you can extend to get people to find you, and how have you actually gone about using the app to aid in that discovery?
Well, the app, I think we think of the app as a little bit further down the funnel in the sense that we do have some people who first find out about us through the App Store, but that seems to be a relatively small number. Most people are going to the App Store with the intent of downloading the Banner because they have used it, because they have seen it elsewhere. And so the app, I think, really represents an opportunity to deepen the relationship with a customer or a prospective customer. We have a pretty tight paywall around the app, which means that if the app were the single way to experience the Banner for non-subscribers, we might struggle to give people enough. But we have a sense that people who are sort of giving us a test drive are doing so on the web and in some cases the app as well. And so we feel like by the time we sort of hit them with the paywall, they are more inclined to risk some money on us. Nice. But the app, I think, really in many ways sort of has a brand value in the sense that it conveys to people that we are a serious organization that has some staying power and is investing in a platform that is going to be around for a while.
That is so interesting, because that you've put words to something which I kind of feel around some of the local and community-led news organizations in the UK, which is that they have a website, but that, to me, now you said that, it does intimates to me that it's kind of, they're not fly by night. Obviously, they are committed, but the actual app itself is kind of that marker, that flag in the sand that says we are here. We have intent to like last beyond the next couple of years. We're not just doing this as an experiment. And I suppose that really does actually aid in getting people across that line to become supporters, because it's a very tangible marker of intent. I've never really thought about it like that before. That's fascinating.
I think it does. I think it definitely has some intangible brand value. I just don't know that we put a number on that.
Yeah, I don't even know how you go about measuring that. Really, is there anybody who you look at and either on a local or national level and think that app is providing a template for how we should be, thinking about using apps to engage audiences? We've spoken about those kind of, the MIT crossword app, because you can't not talk about the MIT when you talk about apps. But is there
Right.
anybody else who you feel like is doing news apps really, really well, or even kind of an holding company or a media organization more generally that you think is incorporating apps into their strategy incredibly well?
I would say we do look a lot at the national players, in part because, and I don't mean to disparage, and I've worked in local media my whole career, but I don't know that there are that many local players that have really prioritized the app experience and have really sort of invested in it in a way that where we could look at it and say these people have really nailed it, in a way that some of the national players have. I think we also look at non sort of news or non sort of publisher apps
Mm.
for inspiration. So whether that is sort of aggregator apps or even maybe some social media apps and things like that. We've talked a lot about vertical video. We produce a fair amount of vertical video. How do we get that into our app experience in a way that feels not like a bolt on? So we, sure, we're looking at TikTok and apps like that to kind of inspire that a little bit. But I feel like that's a bit of a cop out answer, I'm waiting for local publishers to really invest and treat apps as more sort of first class citizens.
No, not a cop out answer at all. I think that's absolutely fascinating. It harkens back to something I heard the analyst Emily Bell say once, which is that when you're on somebody's phone, your competition is every other app on their phone. It doesn't need to be news at all.
Absolutely.
Fascinating to hear quite how you're experimenting with vertical video. I wondered, considering you are relatively small, how do you actually go about incorporating that and I suppose measuring how successful these videos have been? Obviously, there's a reporting process, but to what extent do you feel like vertical video is is going to be a bigger part of the app going forward? Or
I
rather
don't
just
think we
video in
know yet.
general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we know yet. It is a thing that we've invested in part again as a sort of a bit of a brand sort of brand awareness play. We have a pretty active TikTok and Instagram publishing process, and we get a lot of engagement that way. I don't know how much that engagement actually at this point translates into subscriptions,
Mm.
but it definitely helps the brand. And I think one of the things that we've heard from our newsroom is, we spend all this time and effort, on really great vertical video, but it doesn't have a place in our core products. How do we fix that essentially? And so that is what we are talking about right now with both the app and the web, building a place for some of the explainers and sort of really sort of interesting vertical video that we do. Um, I think it remains to be seen how that will do on our core platforms, or if the magic of vertical video is largely the existing social
Mm.
platforms where it lives.
Yeah, I suppose that's a really interesting point. To what extent is it the actual vertical content itself, or is it the kind of community engagement around that? Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating one to see play out. So it's just you've teed up my next question, but also just to bring it full circle for this final question. We've spoken about how apps themselves, they're still obviously you guys have a relatively new app. There is still plenty of experimentation going on, but they have been around for many years now. To what extent do you feel like there is still room for experimentation with the app format for news? We've spoken about integration of vertical video there. We've spoken about kind of the implementation of non-news products. But do you feel like there is still more room for experimentation? And how hopeful
Yeah,
are you that we'll be able to see that from news organizations next couple of years?
Oh, 100%. I mean, one thing that I think we all struggle with is that most news apps are still very text-based, and we know that consumption habits are shifting, video and audio-based, and we're trying to catch up, really. So, how does that reflect in our core native apps? I don't think we know yet. Certainly, we've seen experiments. We've seen publishers, look to integrate podcasts and video more tightly in their apps, but it's still, and again, no disparagement intended, but it still feels a little bit like a bolt-on. Whereas
Yeah.
there are some apps out there that feel more sort of organic, right? Video and other sort of multimedia forms feel like they belong there in a way that I'm not sure publishers, even some of the largest publishers, have cracked yet. So still a long way to go, I'm sure.
I suppose that's why you need that product-led mentality as well, because you can't, with the best will in the world, journalists often, they just focus on that text and they think, well, this is the primary product, and then let's maybe get it out somewhere else as well. But yeah, no, it's going to be fascinating to see quite how that product mentality impacts the development of news apps and where we go from here. But Eric, for people who are looking to learn more about the Banner, where can they go to find more about it?
TheBaltimoreBanner.com.
Thank you so much again to Eric Ulken for speaking to us. Don't forget that we do have a write-up of the key learnings from this interview on voices.media, or it can be dropped in your inbox every Tuesday if you sign up to the publisher newsletter, also on voices.media. That is convenience itself. This season is sponsored by BlueConic, the operating system that puts data into action for marketing and growth doers. The industry-first solution empowers doers with an unmatched range of capabilities to access relevant customer data, create resonant customer experiences, and drive maximum returns for their business. Learn more at BlueConic.com, where data is for doing. We're going to be back next week with another dive into the people and products powering publishing. Once again, nailed it. But until then, you can keep up with all things Media Voices by following us on LinkedIn and subscribing to our weekly newsletter over on voices.media. Please do drop us a line if you have any feedback on how the season's going so far, the site, or even to suggest guests you'd love to hear from. But until then, thank you for listening and goodbye.